In 1934, a federal agriculture inspector traveled into the hollers of eastern Kentucky and wrote a confused report back to Washington. The families he met lived on $4 a week, rarely saw a doctor, and outlived their counterparts in the cities by nearly a decade. Their secret was a kitchen full of tricks that the FDA, the USDA, and 100 food companies have spent the last 50 years trying to make us forget. Number 14 on this list was banned from school cafeterias by 1978. Number 8 contains an ingredient the FDA outlawed in 1960, even though doctors had prescribed it for 2 centuries. Number 3 is now sold for $30 a bottle in health food stores, but it used to live in a jar by every back door. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 20 hillbilly food hacks the government does not want seniors remembering. Number 20, the bacon grease jar. Every hillbilly kitchen had one. A coffee can or an old mason jar sat right next to the stove, half full of golden, semi-solid bacon grease saved from every breakfast that week. When Mama fried potatoes, she did not reach for vegetable oil. She spooned out a dollop of bacon grease. When she made cornbread, the cast iron skillet got a glug of grease before the batter went in. When green beans needed flavor, a tablespoon of grease went into the pot. By the 1980s, the American Heart Association had convinced an entire generation that bacon grease was poison. Families dumped their grease jars and switched to corn oil and Crisco. 3 decades later, researchers at the University of California discovered that the saturated fats in bacon grease were not the killers we were told they were. The real damage came from the hydrogenated oils that replaced them. A pound of bacon yielded about a 1/4 cup of pure cooking gold for free, and your grandmother used every drop. Today's kitchen has expensive olive oil, ghee, and avocado oil sitting on the counter. Your great-grandmother had a coffee can. She was eating better fat than you are. Number 19, clabbered milk for buttermilk. Before refrigeration reached the rural South, fresh milk that turned slightly was not thrown away. It was treasured. Mama would set a bowl of fresh milk on the back of the wood stove and let it sit for a day until it thickened and turned slightly sour. That was clabber. The natural lactic acid bacteria did exactly what factory cultures do today, transforming plain milk into a tangy, probiotic-rich liquid that made the lightest biscuits and pancakes anywhere in the country. A glass of clabbered milk cost nothing because the cow gave it whether you used it or not. Modern food science has finally caught up. The probiotics in raw clabber promote gut health in ways that pasteurized, store-bought buttermilk simply cannot match. The FDA spent decades warning Americans away from anything raw, and we lost the technique entirely. Today's buttermilk comes from a plastic jug made with a cultured starter that produces a thinner, less tangy version of what your grandmother had for free. Real clabber biscuits rose almost an inch higher than modern ones because the live cultures reacted more vigorously with baking soda. The science is not complicated. It is just inconvenient for the dairy industry. Number 18, cornmeal mush for breakfast. A pot of plain yellow cornmeal stirred slowly into boiling salted water until it thickened into a glossy porridge. That was breakfast in 1,000 Appalachian kitchens. Eaten hot with butter and a drizzle of sorghum molasses, it stuck to a child's ribs through a 6-mile walk to the schoolhouse and 3 hours of farm chores after. The leftover mush was poured into a loaf pan and chilled overnight. The next morning, Mama sliced it 1/2 inch thick and fried the slices in bacon grease until the outsides crisped golden and the insides stayed soft. Fried mush with maple syrup or molasses was the second breakfast that fed children through long winter mornings. 1 pound of stone-ground cornmeal cost 6 cents in 1955 and made enough mush to feed a family of 7 for 2 days. Compare that to a box of breakfast cereal today, running $5 and gone in 3 mornings. The government's nutritional guidelines now warn against the saturated fat and refined carbs of fried mush, but those warnings ignore what the dish actually delivered: slow-burning energy, satiety, and corn that contained the niacin our bodies needed before vitamin pills existed. We traded mush for sugary cereal and called it progress. Number 17. Apple butter cooked down all day. By October in Appalachia, every farm with an apple tree had a copper kettle bubbling outside over an open fire. Apples that were too bruised or too small to sell were peeled, cored, and dumped into the kettle by the bushel. Mama and the children took turns stirring with a long wooden paddle for 8 or 9 hours straight. As the apples cooked, the natural sugars caramelized. The volume was reduced by 2/3, and the pale fruit turned dark mahogany. Cinnamon, cloves, and allspice went in at the end. The result was a thick, dark, intensely flavored spread that tasted nothing like the watery, jarred apple butter sold today. A bushel of culled apples cost 25 cents in 1958 and produced enough apple butter to last a family until the next October. It went on biscuits, on cornbread, on toast, stirred into oatmeal, spooned over pork chops. The all-day cooking concentrated the pectin in the apple skins until the butter set thick without any added pectin or sugar from the store. Modern jarred versions add high fructose corn syrup because manufacturers cannot afford to cook the fruit long enough to develop natural sweetness. Your grandmother's apple butter was free, healthier, and tasted like fall itself. Number 16. The Smokehouse Salt Cure. Behind every hillbilly homestead stood a small wooden building, smoke-stained and dark, where every November Mama and Daddy turned a freshly butchered hog into the next 12 months of meat. Hams, shoulders, and bacon slabs got rubbed with a heavy mixture of salt, brown sugar, and black pepper, then layered into wooden boxes and left to cure for 6 weeks. After the cure, the meat hung in the smokehouse over a low hickory fire for another 3 days. The smoke and salt together made meat that could hang in the rafters for an entire year without refrigeration, getting better as it aged. A 200-pound hog cost about $35 to raise in 1962 and produced enough cured pork to feed a family of 6 through every meal that needed protein. The USDA now requires commercial cured meat to be made with sodium nitrite, a chemical preservative that recent studies link to colorectal cancer. Real smokehouse cured pork uses only salt, sugar, and thyme. The natural curing process is slower and harder to scale, which is why agribusiness lobbied successfully against home curing through the 1970s. Most counties now require expensive permits to cure your own pork. Your grandfather smoked his ham for free. Number 15. Sourdough starter passed down generations. In a covered crock on the back of the stove sat a bubbling, alive thing that some hillbilly families had been keeping continuously since before the Civil War. Sourdough starter was just flour and water, but the wild yeasts and bacteria living in it were a unique colony that made bread no factory could replicate. Mama would scoop out a cup every morning to make biscuits, pancakes, or bread, then feed the starter back with fresh flour and water to keep it alive. Some starters traveled the Trail of Tears, came across the prairie in covered wagons, and crossed 3 centuries of American history without ever dying. A neighbor's starter was the most valuable wedding gift a young bride could receive. The wild fermentation pre-digested the gluten and phytic acid in the wheat, making sourdough bread far easier to digest than the rapid-rise commercial bread that replaced it. Researchers now know that people with mild gluten sensitivity often tolerate traditional sourdough fine. The food industry pushed industrial yeast in the 1960s because it was faster, more predictable, and cheaper to mass produce. We gave up bread that nourished us for bread that bloated us. Some hillbilly families still feed the same starter their great-great-grandmothers fed. They never gave it up. Number 14. Lard pie crusts. First pattern break. Here is where things get political. In 1977, a Senate committee released the McGovern Report, and it declared that animal fats were the primary cause of heart disease in America. School cafeterias were ordered to remove lard from their kitchens. The dietary guidelines that followed pushed an entire generation toward vegetable shortening, margarine, and seed oils. They were wrong. Lard pie crusts were the gold standard of American baking from 1820 to 1975 because lard, the rendered fat from pasture-raised pigs, contains a unique molecular structure that produces the flakiest, most tender pastry possible. Mama would cut cold lard into flour with a fork until the mixture resembled coarse cornmeal. Add ice water and roll out a crust that shattered into 1,000 layers when you cut it. A pound of lard cost 12 cents in 1955 and made 12 pie crusts. The replacement, hydrogenated vegetable shortening, contained trans fats. We now know those trans fats are far worse for cardiovascular health than the lard they replaced. The FDA finally banned trans fats in 2018, 4 decades after they replaced lard in American kitchens. Modern bakers are quietly switching back to leaf lard at $12 a pound. Your grandmother had it for free from her own hog. She was right the whole time. Number 13. Chow-chow from the garden's last gasp. By late September, the Appalachian garden was producing strange leftover vegetables, green tomatoes that would never ripen, last cabbages, undersized cucumbers, the final peppers. Throwing them away was unthinkable. Chow-chow was the answer. A coarsely chopped relish of every leftover vegetable, packed into mason jars with hot vinegar, sugar, mustard seed, nubseed, and turmeric. By Christmas, the chow-chow had aged into something tangy, sweet, and complex that made beans, cornbread, and pork chops taste like restaurant food. A quart jar of chow-chow cost about 15 cents in ingredients in 1960 and added flavor to dozens of winter meals. The pickling preserved the vegetables for 2 years on a pantry shelf. Modern food science recognizes that the lacto-fermented version of chow-chow, made without water bath canning, contains beneficial bacteria that aid digestion. Store-bought relishes today are pasteurized, dead products containing high-fructose corn syrup and artificial colors. Your grandmother's chow-chow had 2 ingredients you could not buy: thyme and the wild bacteria that lived in her root cellar. Every Appalachian family had a slightly different recipe, and arguments over whose mama made the best chow-chow could carry on for 50 years. The relish aisle of the modern supermarket has nothing remotely close. Number 12. Drying apples on screens. Mama would pick a bushel of small, tart mountain apples in October, peel them, core them, and slice them thin. The slices went onto wooden screens, 1 layer thick, and the screens went up into the attic where summer heat from the metal roof dried the apples slowly over 2 weeks. The result was leathery, intensely sweet, sticky rings that kept for 2 years in a glass jar. They went into stack cakes, fried pies, oatmeal, and were eaten as candy by children who never tasted store-bought sweets. A bushel of apples cost 20 cents in 1955 and produced enough dried apples for an entire winter. The slow attic drying preserved nutrients that modern dehydrators destroy with high heat. Commercial dried apples now contain sulfur dioxide as a preservative, and the FDA admits it causes asthma reactions in roughly 1 in 100 Americans. Hillbilly attic-dried apples needed no preservatives because the natural sugars and acids did the preservation work themselves. The technique requires nothing but a sunny attic and patience. Most American homes have neither anymore. We pay $6 for a small bag of preservative-laden dried apples that taste like nothing. Your grandmother had a paper sack full of mountain candy that lasted till spring. Number 11. Pawpaws and persimmons from the woods. Walking the back 40 in late September, Mama would carry a feed sack and fill it with 2 fruits that no grocery store has ever sold. Pawpaws are a custard-fleshed fruit native to the Appalachian woods that tastes like a cross between mango and banana. Persimmons are small, orange, and astringent until the first frost, then turn into pure honey. Both grow wild across the entire eastern United States, and both have been almost completely forgotten by American eaters. The pawpaw is the largest edible fruit native to North America, and Native Americans cultivated it for centuries before European settlement. By 1900, every Appalachian family knew exactly which trees in the woods bore the best fruit. By 2000, the knowledge had vanished. Persimmon pudding, persimmon bread, and pawpaw custard were staples of the fall hillbilly table that cost nothing because the fruit grew wild. The reason these fruits disappeared from American eating is simple. Pawpaws bruise too easily to ship, and persimmons require frost to be palatable. Industrial agriculture cannot grow them, ship them, or sell them, so the food industry pretended they did not exist. Researchers at Ohio State University recently confirmed that pawpaws contain a compound called acetogenin that shows promise against several cancers. Number 10. Cracklin from rendered fat. This is a second pattern break. Here is where waste became luxury. When Mama rendered lard from a freshly butchered hog in November, the small bits of pork skin and fat that floated to the top of the rendering pot were not thrown away. She fished them out, salted them heavily, and let them crisp into golden, crunchy nuggets called Cracklin. They went into cornbread to make crackling cornbread, the most coveted bread in Appalachia. They got eaten as snacks the way modern children eat potato chips. They lasted for a month in a metal tin. A single hog produced enough cracklin to last until Christmas. The rendering process took an entire day, but the byproduct was free protein, free fat, and free flavor that no grocery store snack can match. Modern pork rinds are a pale industrial imitation of real cracklin. They are mass-produced, deep-fried in seed oils, and bear about the same relationship to true cracklin as canned cheese spread bears to aged cheddar. FDA has spent 30 years warning Americans about the dangers of pork fat, but new metabolic research suggests that the saturated fat in pasture-raised pork is a high-quality energy source that triggers satiety in ways processed snacks never can. Your grandmother ate cracklin and walked 9 miles a day. She was lean. Number 9. Poke salad in spring. Every April in the hollers, Mama and the children went out to the field edges and harvested the young leaves of pokeweed before the plant matured. Mature poke is poisonous, but the early spring shoots, harvested when they are no more than 6 inches tall, become poke salad, the most prized green of the Appalachian spring. The technique was non-negotiable. The leaves had to be boiled in 3 changes of water to leach out the natural alkaloids, then sautéed in bacon grease with scrambled eggs and served with cornbread. After a winter of nothing but root vegetables and dried beans, the first plate of poke salad was an event that families looked forward to all winter. Poke salad is rich in vitamins A and C, exactly the nutrients that depleted Appalachian bodies needed after a long winter. Every Appalachian family knew exactly how to prepare it safely. The FDA now warns against eating poke salad entirely, refusing to acknowledge the traditional preparation that made it safe. Restaurant chains will not serve it because of liability concerns. The knowledge is dying with the last generation that grew up eating it. Tony Joe White wrote a hit song about poke salad in 1969. By 2010, most Americans did not know what the song was about. Number 8. Sassafras tea. The roots of the sassafras tree, dug up in early spring and boiled in water, produced a sweet root beer-flavored tea that was the most common spring tonic in Appalachia from 1750 to 1960. Mama would brew a strong pot every March, served warm with honey to thin the blood after a long winter. Children drank it. Old people swore by it. It tasted like the woods themselves, dark and earthy and slightly sweet. The original Coca-Cola, root beer, and 100 other American drinks were all originally flavored with sassafras. In 1960, the FDA banned sassafras after a single study found that safrole, a compound in the root, caused liver tumors in rats fed enormous doses. The dose required to harm a human would have been hundreds of cups a day. The traditional spring tonic, used safely by Native Americans and Appalachian families for 300 years, was outlawed almost overnight. The food industry replaced sassafras with artificial flavors, and root beer never tasted right again. Recent research has shown that traditional sassafras tea contains beneficial polyphenols that may have actually been responsible for the spring health. Benefits the old-timers reported. The risk was always overstated. The tradition was lost. 1 pound of dried sassafras root is now restricted in some states. Number 7. Hominy from corn and lye. This is the most chemically sophisticated dish in Appalachian cooking, and almost nobody under 60 knows how to make it anymore. Mama would take dried field corn, soak it for several days in a solution of water and wood ash lye, drain it, and rinse it repeatedly. The alkaline solution dissolved the tough outer hulls and chemically transformed the corn into hominy, plump white kernels with a chewy texture and a complex, slightly sweet flavor. Nixtamalization was borrowed from Mesoamerican cooking and absorbed into Appalachian foodways through Cherokee and Creek. Influence. The chemistry matters. Untreated corn is missing the bioavailable form of niacin, which is why diets dominated by corn cause pellagra, a deadly nutritional disease. Nixtamalization unlocks the niacin and prevents pellagra. Hillbilly cooks who made hominy from scratch were doing advanced food chemistry without knowing the words for it. Hominy went into soup, was ground into grits, was fried with onions, and was eaten with butter and salt for breakfast. A bushel of corn cost a quarter in 1955 and produced 10 pounds of hominy. Today's canned hominy is mass-produced with sodium hydroxide instead of wood ash and contains preservatives. The traditional hardwood ash lye method is functionally extinct. We forgot how to make our own corn safe. Number 6. Cast iron seasoning that lasted 40 years. Third pattern break. Here is what no nutritionist tells you. The seasoned cast iron skillet on the back of Mama's stove was not just cookware, it was a daily iron supplement. Decades of cooking acidic foods like tomatoes, beans, and apples in well-seasoned cast iron leached small but consistent amounts of dietary iron into every meal. Researchers at Texas A&M confirmed in 1986 that food cooked in cast iron contains up to 20 times more bioavailable iron than the same food cooked in stainless steel or aluminum. Iron deficiency anemia, the leading nutritional deficiency in American women today, was almost unheard of among hillbilly women who cooked exclusively in cast iron 3 meals a day. The seasoning itself, a polymerized layer of bacon grease baked onto the iron over decades, made the surface effectively non-stick without any chemical coating. Teflon was sold to American families in the 1960s as a labor-saving miracle. By 2015, the chemical used to make Teflon, PFOA, was found to cause cancer and was phased out. Meanwhile, the cast iron skillet your grandmother bought for $2 in 1948 is still selling on eBay for $80 today, and it is still functional. Some skillets in Appalachian families have been in continuous use for 5 generations. They get better with age. Number 5. Stacked cake with dried apples. The Appalachian stacked cake is the most distinctive cake in American baking, and most modern home cooks have never heard of it. Mama would make 4 or 5 thin, sorghum-sweetened molasses cake layers, no thicker than a pancake, and stack them with cooked dried apple filling in between. Then, she would let the whole cake sit on the counter for 24 hours before serving. During the rest, the dried apple filling soaked into the dry cake layers, transforming the entire cake into a moist, dense, deeply spiced dessert that bore no resemblance to the layered cake when first assembled. Stack cakes were the wedding cake of the Southern Appalachians from 1830 to 1950. Each guest would bring a single layer to the wedding, and the bride's mother would assemble the layers with the family's apple filling. A cake with 12 layers was a popular bride. A cake with 3 layers told the community something about the wedding. The dried apple filling cost almost nothing because the apples had been dried free in the attic. The molasses sweetened the cake without expensive white sugar. Modern American baking has nothing like the stack cake. The technique requires patience, dried apples, and sorghum molasses, 3 things that have largely vanished from American kitchens. The cake is functionally extinct. Number 4. Souse meat from the whole hog. After the November hog killing, every part of the animal got used. The head meat, the feet, the heart, and the tongue, it all went into a large pot with vinegar, salt, pepper, and red pepper flakes, and simmered for hours until the meat fell from the bones and the natural collagen in the joints turned the cooking liquid into a thick gelatin. Strained and chilled in a loaf pan, the result was Souse meat, also called head cheese, a sliceable, savory cold cut with a vinegar tang that fed the family for 3 weeks. A single hog's head and feet, parts that would otherwise be discarded, produced 10 pounds of souse meat. The cost was effectively 0. The protein content was tremendous. The collagen content, now sold separately as a health supplement for $40 a bottle, was free. Souse meat is functionally extinct in mainstream American eating. The few remaining producers are small Appalachian butchers selling to an aging customer base. The food industry abandoned souse meat in the 1970s because it required real butchery and slow cooking that mass production could not replicate. Industrial meat processing now extracts collagen as gelatin and sells it back to consumers as a beauty supplement. Your grandmother ate it for breakfast on Tuesday morning between 2 slices of bread. Number 3. Apple cider vinegar in the stoneware crock. Every hillbilly kitchen had a stoneware crock of unfiltered apple cider vinegar made from leftover apple cores and peels, with a strange-looking jellyfish-like substance floating in it. That gelatinous mass was the mother, a colony of beneficial bacteria and yeasts that converted apple juice into vinegar over 6 weeks. A spoonful of mother vinegar went into beans to soften them. A tablespoon went into greens to brighten them. A small glass with honey was given to anyone with a sore throat or an upset stomach. Apple cider vinegar with the mother is now sold for $30 a bottle in health food stores under fancy brand names. Your grandmother made it for free from apple scraps. Modern research has confirmed that the active compounds in raw apple cider vinegar help regulate blood sugar, support gut health, and reduce inflammation in ways that pasteurized supermarket vinegar does not. The FDA mandates that all commercial vinegar be pasteurized, killing the mother and destroying most of the beneficial bacteria. The reason given is shelf stability. The real reason is that live mother vinegar requires careful handling and a slow process that does not scale to industrial production. We pay $30 for a small bottle of what was once a free byproduct of putting up apples. The math is insulting. Number 2, cornbread baked in cast iron with bacon grease. Real Appalachian cornbread is not the sweet, cake-like substance sold in restaurants today. It is dense, savory, slightly crumbly, and made with 3 ingredients: stone-ground yellow cornmeal, buttermilk, and salt. Mama would heat a cast iron skillet in the oven with a generous spoonful of bacon grease until the grease was sizzling hot. She would pour the batter into the screaming hot skillet and bake it at 450 degrees for 20 minutes. The batter hit the hot grease and immediately formed a crisp, brown crust on the bottom, the most prized part of the cornbread. The interior stayed dense and slightly moist. There was no sugar. There was no flour. There were no eggs in the most traditional version. A skillet of cornbread cost about 10 cents to make in 1955 and fed a family of 7. Modern boxed cornbread mixes contain sugar, flour, and chemical leaveners that produce a substance closer to yellow cake than to real cornbread. The technique of pouring batter into a screaming hot greased cast iron skillet has been almost completely abandoned by modern home cooks. The crust suffers. The flavor suffers. Stone-ground cornmeal, the only kind that produces real cornbread, is now sold for $6 a pound at specialty stores. Your grandmother bought it for 9 cents. Number 1, beans cooked all day with a ham hock. At the top of this list sits the meal that fed Appalachia, the rural South, and the working class of the Midwest for 2 centuries. A pound of dried pinto beans soaked overnight, drained, and put in a heavy pot with a smoked ham hock, an onion, a few cloves of garlic, salt, and enough water to cover. The pot simmered low on the back of the stove for 6 to 8 hours, while Mama did everything else that needed doing that day. By supper time, the beans had broken down at the edges, the ham hock had given up every last shred of meat, and the cooking liquid had transformed into a thick, smoky, deep brown pot liquor that was richer than any restaurant broth in America. Served with a wedge of cast iron cornbread crumbled directly into the bowl, this was the meal that built generations of coal miners, textile workers, and farmers. A pound of dried beans cost 10 cents. A ham hock cost 15 cents. The whole pot, enough to feed 7 people for 2 days, came in under 30 cents. The nutritional profile was nearly perfect. Beans provide protein, fiber, folate, and slow-burning carbohydrates. The pork added fat, salt, and flavor. The cornbread added the niacin from nixtamalized corn that beans alone do not provide. Together, the meal was complete. Modern nutritionists studying the diets of Appalachian communities in the 1940s expressed surprise at how healthy these communities were on what looked like a meager menu. The math was simple. Beans and cornbread is a perfect food. We replaced it with frozen dinners and cans of soup. Every part of that trade was a downgrade. Make one of these this week, just one. The pot of beans, the cast iron cornbread, the apple butter, the chow-chow. Make something your great-grandmother made when she had nothing and made it taste like everything. Then sit down at the table and eat it slow. Drop the one you are going to try in the comments. I want to know if the sassafras tea gets more love than the stack cake. I want to know if anyone reading this still has a bacon grease jar by the stove. Because these were not just food hacks. They were a way of feeding a family that the modern grocery store cannot match for any price.